Hello everyone and welcome to Angie B Cards and Crafts. Today I'm going to look at a video using the things that I have in front of me. So I've got Holtz Distress Oxide Sprays, which I absolutely love. Seedless Preserve, Picked Raspberry, which I spent many years calling Pickled Raspberry, and Mermaid Lagoon. I've also got Holtz Distress Archival inks. So the difference between the two things is these are water reactive, so when you spray water on them they change, they alter, they split, they become different colours and they move. With Archival ink, if you spray water on them they stay put. So this is to form the background of the piece that I'm making. In addition to that, I've also obviously got some card, and I've got AALL and Create stencil, large dot stencil and the human stencil, and I've also got AALL and Create stamps. This is the dots stamp and circle stamp, and I've also got some Tracy Evans stamps here as well, one of her flower set. In addition, I've got VersaFine Clair black ink. VersaFine Clair is a permanent ink and it just stamps incredibly well. I absolutely love using it. I've only discovered it about 6 months ago and it's the only thing that I ever stamp anything in black in now. I don't use any of my other black inks. So I haven't prepped exactly how this is going to look, so let's just see what happens. So the first thing we need to do is get some pieces of card. I'll just move some of these things out of the way. We're not going to use the inks and stencils, etc. just at the moment. So to start with, I'm going to use 2 pieces of card. Now this is Pink Frog card, super smooth, and it's one that I really like using. So on these, what I'm going to do is just spray some inks, some Distress Oxide inks. The other thing that I also have is a bottle with just tap water in it. Okay, this happens to be the Distress sprayer. I really like the way this one works because it's a simple trigger action, but I also have different size bottles that are just press action spray water bottles. So it's whatever spray water bottle you've got. You can also just use flicking of water if you so desire. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start to spray the card. Now, in order to prevent this going over absolutely everything, I tend to put one of my raggies at one side. Now this one I thought was quite appropriate today. It's my Union Jack raggie, since it's VE day while I'm making this video. So I'm just going to put that to one side because I tend to spray across the ways, and I'm going to do the cards one card at a time because I'm going to use 2 different methods on the cards. So to start with, the advisable thing to do with these, they actually have the colour at the bottom, the pigment sits at the bottom and it's quite chalky. So if you were just to spray it, you wouldn't get the true effect. The magic sits at the bottom, so it's more of a suspension. The little particles suspend within it, but then they're heavier and they drop down to the bottom of the fluid. So in order to use them, you need to give them a shake. You can hear there's a little ball in there as well. Now, what's recommended by Holtz is to actually take off the lid, the plastic cap, and cover this piece with a rag. And what you're meant to do is gently swirl, and the ball gently moves them around. But what he says is as long as you cover it, you can give it a good shake. So that's what I'm going to do with each of these. Okay, so once you've given them a shake, just put my raggie back to protect things, and then we're going to spray it. Now you can spray it in different ways. You can spray it closer and you get quite an intense colour, or from further away you get it lighter. So I want it to be quite intense, and pop the lid back on that one. Then I'm going to get the Mermaid Lagoon. Again, give it a shake. Don't worry about this here, we are going to use that as well. So again, put the raggie down to protect everything. And you can see the colours are mixing. Now the thing with spray is you never know what you're going to get because it's going to fall where it falls. So don't worry about it. It's not a precision thing. It's just about having fun and getting messy and seeing what you make. And at the end of the day, even if you make something and go, you know what, I don't like it, you can just gesso over it and start again, or just throw it in the bin. All you've used is a piece of paper and some ink. So what I'm going to do now, you've got two options with this. You can leave it as it is, or you can add water to it. Now I like it when you add water to it. I like the effect this has. So if you just watch how it changes when I add the water, you can see it starts to look a little bit chalky, and it changes the colours that are there. So you can see there, and this, the way that it starts to swirl around. So I'm going to put, you can see that I'm just doing very gentle little squirts and getting some dots as well. So you can change the effect depending how you actually spray it. Okay, so once you've got your colour down, what you can do is move it around, get the liquid. You can see it's a very fluid thing. Once you're happy with that, you can then choose to have it as it is and set it to one side, or you can do what I'm going to do for speed and actually use a heat tool. This heat tool has got quite a disperse jet of hot air coming out of it. It isn't a hairdryer, it's far, far hotter than a hairdryer. Please do not use it as such. It is a heat tool for crafting. It's the same temperature as the more intense heat tools that you get, but the difference is the size of the hole. So the size of this hole is quite wide, and it's designed to squirt outwards with the heat, whereas with the other ones it's a more intensive location of the heat, so it's more for embossing. This isn't designed for embossing. You can, but it takes longer. So I'm just going to gently heat this, and you can see the colours changing and moving even with the heat. Now this is just layer one, and the really good thing about this ink is that you can layer it up. It doesn't turn to mud. If you dry this off and then put another colour on top, it will sit on top, but it will show some of the colour underneath. If you leave it wet and you put another colour, they mix. Okay. The other really nice thing that I love about the Distress stuff is you can see where it's pooled. You can actually choose to lift that, and again you get a different effect. So you don't have to lift all of it, or you can. It's entirely up to you how you want your piece of paper to look. So this is one. I'm just going to set it to one side, and I'm going to bring in my other piece of card. But before I do that, I'm going to use my water bottle again, and that just squirts on top there. And then we're just going to get a little bit messy. Again, just a plain piece of smooth white card, and then just see what you come up with. And you can choose how you want it to look by choosing where you put which of the colours. You have the option to do it this way, which is quite specific as to where you want to do it, or you can just run your card through and see what happens. So I want a little bit more there, and then I think that's pretty much covered. So there's still a bit left, so I'm actually going to get another piece of card and just take a few more out of this. What you'll find nowadays is an awful lot of crafters are frugal. They're not wanting to waste the ink that they put down that isn't on their specific piece of work. So you can see we're still getting enough ink there to cover another background. It doesn't have to be used in the same project. It can be if you want it to be. What I like about doing this is that if you have one piece that you're initially thinking was going to be your main background, you can change your mind. But then you also have coordinating pieces which you can put your sentiments on if you're making a card, or you can put your little journaling areas on if you're writing some form of a journal. So we've got there three very, very different images. Now I'm just going to wipe this up. The easiest way to do it, again, just use water and then give it a wipe with the raggy. You could potentially get a few more prints out of that, but you don't want to just sit and watch me doing that. So we'll get rid of that, and we'll give these latter two a quick blast with a heat gun. Now the reason it's important that the ink is dry is that if you're going to stamp on top of it, you need a dry surface, because otherwise the ink doesn't settle into the card properly. and you don't get the crispest of images. So this just takes a couple of minutes to dry it off. You can dry it from the back as well if you want to. And it's sometimes a little bit quicker if you lift it off your mat, because then you're not trying to dry the mat at the same time as drying your card. But just be warned, it can burn your fingers, so just keep your fingers out of the way. Right, just check this first one, and we've still got a little bit of ink there. We'll dab that off just for speed. So you can see there that we've used 3 inks, but they've mixed to give us 3 very different looking backgrounds. These 2 look similar because they were done by mopping up the ink that was on the mat. This one looks different because it was sprayed on. I've got some little bits of gold on here, and that's because over at this side of my mat I've got some gold, or what's it called? It'll come to me in a minute. In fact, if I find it, I can read it, can't I? I was playing with texture paste, that's the word I was looking for. I was playing with this yesterday, and I've obviously not quite cleaned it up properly. Right, so what I'm going to do now, you can actually add layer upon layer onto this. So if you wanted to add more of the purple or more of the blue onto them, you can do that. That's entirely up to you. Just experiment, see what you can come up with. So I'm going to use this as my main background. Okay, now what I'm going to do is use some of these stencils. Now again, you do have the option, and if I just pull some of these out, similar colours. I have some Distress Oxides here. When I find the right ones. We'll go with that one. Okay, so again, I've got the pink, the blue and the purple. They're slightly different shades, but we can still use them. Now, to use Distress Oxides in this way, it's just like using any other ink that you're going to stencil with. So you choose where you want to stencil. I'm using the Distress Oxides for this because they give a softer background, and then if I want to, I can again add water, and these will move in a similar way to the Distress Oxide Sprays. I'm not going to add any more water, I'm just going to put them on and see what sort of background we get. So because we've got the purple as the main colour, I'm going to go with the blue. Now this one is broken china, so it's not quite the same colour, but it doesn't matter. This is for a background, so you just want a hint of different colours. Now these egg sponges I quite like using. This one's a relatively new one, so it's only got one other colour on. They're quite nice, and you can give them a wash and reuse them. What I've found is that when they're washed, they tend to get a little bit bigger, but they still work just as well. And I do like them, they're quite comfortable and easy to use. Alternatives are pieces of cut up scouring pad, or some cut and dry foam, or you can use brushes to brush over the colours and get them on in much more gentle layers, or you can use a distressing tool. Right, so let's put a little bit of this down. So just put some vague colours, so you can see there's just a hint of that there. So I'm going to now add pink and see if that will sit on top. So I'm going to turn my stencil. I'm also going to turn to a clean area of the sponge. Okay, so we're going to add some more dots. So that shows up a little bit more because it's paler onto the darker purple. So you can choose to add just tiny dots. You can see the stencil's got some huge dots as well, which can be really good. I'm sticking with the smaller ones for this one, but it's entirely up to you. This is, I said I was playing with the texture paste yesterday. This is using the same stencil just on a piece of paper because I was fidgeting and seeing, I've mixed it with some other texture paste to see the impact. So you'll see some of this, there's a whiteness to it instead of just the pure gold. This has got more of the gold to it. So this is the pure gold. And then these ones with the white on, that's because I mixed it with a white texture paste as well, just to see what the impact was. And I quite like it. It's more of a distressed look, whereas this is quite a nice, neat colouring. Okay. So I'm just going to give that a blast, because you don't want to sit them too much on top of each other if you've not dried in between the layers. So it'd be really good to know what other people are making using Distress Oxides. I absolutely love them. I haven't got all the colours, but my aim is at some point to have all the colours, but I haven't as yet got them. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to use this piece here, the 3 circles. I'm just going to use them down one side, and I'm going to use the Archival ink because I don't want this to move. Which colour? I think I'll go for the pink and see how it shows up. Now this is a different type of ink, so this is permanent. This sits more solidly on your paper. It's not going to move about. So you're going to get a very different look and a more intensive colour. So this is a piece of cut and dried foam, but I've just checked. The best way to check whether or not you can use it is rub it on the back of your hand. If no colour comes off, I think the other end probably. You can see the little bit of green come off there. So if I use the end that was clean, I can use it on here. So for getting the ink up, your sponge on the ink pad is soaked in the colour. So you can either dab into it, or you can, if you have it down, you can actually circle into it and get a really good covering throughout your sponge. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just rub that over the stencil. Now, when I'm not making a video, when I'm doing this just for myself, what I would then do with this, because there's a lot of ink going on top of this, because the material the stencil's made out of is a plastic, it sits on top. So what you can do is spritz it with water, so just a little gentle squirt of water, and put it onto another piece of paper. In fact, I will show you that. I'll lift that off. You can see we've got the 3 circles there, which is what we wanted. I'll pop that lid on, get another piece of paper. Come here, little piece of paper. There we go. So plain white piece of paper. And then I'm just going to spritz this. I'm going to do it away because I don't want it to go all over my desk. So you can see it's just got a spritz of water, and then turn it over, put it down on the paper, and then using the raggy, just holding it on. Now the reason that we put the raggy on top is the water will tend to seep out from underneath the plastic, and you don't want it to just spread onto your page. So your raggy will actually absorb that a little bit. Okay. So we'll take that off, lift that, and there you've got another background for another card, or you could do it in your journal. You can see there's still some ink left on there. You could probably do a couple of images, but we'll stop at one because that was just to show you how that would work. So what you can do with this now is give it another squirt and then give it a wipe. Now because it is permanent ink, it doesn't necessarily come off straight away, which is absolutely fine. Don't worry about that. If you do get permanent ink onto your stencils, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference to how they function. The thing that you need to be worried about with stencils is if you get any of the texture paste in them, because particularly with smaller holes, what can happen is the texture paste can block them, and if you block up the holes, you're not going to get a good, clear, crisp image. So going back to the card top that we're making, what I'm going to do now is look at doing some stamping. So I've got these 2, which I'm going to use. I think I'll use this one because we've got lots of this from the stencil, because this is the same as the stencil. I'll just show you the comparison. So it is the same pattern, but in small stamp form. This is an A7 stamp, I think then. Yeah, A7. Yes, it is. And this one's an A7 stamp. Now there is also a stencil that AALL and Create do, which has this on it, but I haven't got that. It's on my list. Now with these stencils, they are clear acrylic stencils, and the backing sticks really quite firmly to them. Okay, these are really good because you can use these to decide where you want to place the stamp. Probably not so much with background stamps, but with your main image stamps. Now what I tend to do when using this for a background, you can see it's got some orange to it, and that's because I was using it with orange Archival ink, so it doesn't tend to come off the stamps as well. So I'm going to use the Archival ink, but I'm going to use the purple, I think. So with this, I'm not going to put it onto a stamping block because I just want parts of it. In fact, I'm going to stick it back onto its backing and it doesn't stick to things on me. What we're going to do is just stamp up little bits of it like that, okay? And then we're just going to put little bits around various areas. I'll put some there, and I think I'd quite like some down this side. Okay, so that's enough. That's just a hint, and that's what I wanted. Again, what I tend to do with this is, oh, where have I put my magnet? Oh, there it is. Just give it a bit of a wipe to get off any immediate ink. But don't worry if your stamps aren't spotlessly clean. As long as it's not Distress Oxide or you've not stamped into any sort of structure paste. If you have, then you need to clean them off with Distress Oxide, just with water. If I put them into structure paste, they tend to go in a bowl of soapy water or straight into the sink of soapy water, so that you're not going to damage the integrity of the stamp. Okay, so that is our background complete, and I'm quite happy with that. And one of the things that I like about this background is we've got a semi-focus down one side and then a kind of blank area, so we can do what we like with it. And this set I really love, and I have a favourite stamp in this set, and it's this one here. I've used this quite a lot recently. I'm going to use, this is quite a thin stamping block, again it's AALL and Create, and I'm just going to stick my stamp on. And the reason I like this stamping block is because it does have that flexibility. So not so much with this stamp, but with some of the more complex stamps that AALL and Create make, there's a lot of detail on them. And this detail can get lost if you haven't got flexibility in your stamping block. So if I show you a stamp like this, you're actually going to really struggle to get all of this intricate detail stamped if you haven't got any flexibility, because the chances of having a perfectly flat surface when you're stamping are pretty slim. Glass mats have got give in them, desks have got give in them, so to get that flat surface is quite hard to do. Right, so I'm going to use my black VersaFine Clair ink. This is a pigment ink, so this is permanent, and what we're going to do is just very simply ink up the stamp. Now I'm putting quite a lot of ink on. I want to make sure that it inks well so that I don't miss any bits. You'll notice that I've got some down here. If you want to, you can wipe that off, but it's not essential. The other thing that's good about VersaFine Clair is that it actually has quite a long open time, so it doesn't dry off straight away. So you can have a look, check that you've covered it all, and if you haven't, just come back in. Okay, so again, just give that a wipe. And I like, when I'm using this stamping block, to actually turn it sideways on because it's easier to manage. And I think I want that about there. Okay. Right, so there we go. There's my image. It's a nice crisp image. And I love the doodle effect of these flowers. I think Tracy Evans is an amazing artist and does some absolutely brilliant drawings of flowers. I think they're great. They're nothing like I could do. I'm dreadful at drawing. So then it's thinking about what sentiment we want, and what we can use for the sentiment is part of one of the other pieces of card, because they tone in. They're the same colours, they're coming up differently, but they can tone in. So I'm going to use this one. And what I like, because I'm a little bit messy in how I like things to be, is that I tear the images that are used as sentiments quite often instead of cutting them out neatly. So if we take that off, pop it up there out of the way, put the sentiment stamp on, and then just move the main image to one side so it doesn't get in the way. So again, this is a sentiment from the set, and you can choose. What's nice about this is you can actually choose where you want to stamp it, so you can pick the colour that you want behind it. So if I wanted more blue, I could go here, but I actually want more of the pink, so I'm going to go here. Okay, so when you're stamping, you want to keep your image still, so always keep one hand on the image, never lift both hands off, always keep one hand on the image, and just move it around to make sure you get a really good stamp. And don't just put it on and lift it off and expect there to be a perfect image. You need to have enough time for the ink and the card it's going on to become good friends. Because if they're not good friends, they're not going to sit together very well. So you can see there, I've got a nice background there with a nice sentiment on. So now I need to put it onto here. So the first thing I'm going to do is rip the card to give it rough edges. So when you rip it, in fact, before I do that, I'm just going to give this a quick blast so I don't smudge it. And what I often do, which I shall do with a piece of scrap paper here, is just blot over the black ink. Because if you blot over it, if there is any damp ink, because I'm going to be handling it, or there's none there, but because I'm going to be handling it, I don't want to smudge it, so that's why I blot it. Now I'm going to tear the edges, and you've got two options when you tear the edges of card. Now if I do it down this end, it'll be clearer. So if I tear it with my right hand doing the work towards me, I get white in my left hand and colour in my right hand. But if I tear it with my left hand, the colour is on the left side. So you need to think about where you want your colour. Do you want to have white edges, or do you want to have coloured edges to the piece of work that you're doing? Now on this, I want to have the colour all the way around. So I'm going to tear with my right hand. I'm going to come across like this. And don't worry about being neat with your tearing, it does not matter. And again, I want the colour here, so I need to tear with the sentiment in my right hand so that the coloured card is there. And again, sentiment in my right hand and pull forwards so the coloured card is there. So think about where you actually want it. And again, sentiment in my right hand and pull forwards. So that means all the white pieces are on the scrap paper that I've taken off. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. What I would tend to do now is get a little bit of black ink, but I'm going to use a Pro Marker pen, which is just a black Pro Marker, and just go around the edges. And the reason that I'm doing this is just to make them stand out a little bit, because otherwise you won't really notice the edges. Now with the Pro Marker, what you tend to see, because this is an alcohol ink, is that it comes in, which I personally quite like. Some people want a very fine edging or a much softer edging, so they may well use a distress ink and actually do some shading using a sponge and a distress ink or another ink, but I quite like that. And I'm going to use the same process around the edge of my card, because my card at the minute has got some blue, some white, some pink, some purple. I want it to stand out a little bit. So again, I'm just going to go along the edges. And it's a very, very simple process. And it just neatens it up. It's the finishing touches that can actually make a card sometimes. You can do a very simple, quick one without the finishing touches, but if you add on those finishing touches, it just looks a little bit smarter. Right, so somewhere I have my double-sided tape. There it is. And I shall just get my scissors or sticky stuff, which are here. And I'm going to stick this on. So very simple. You can choose if you want to put this onto foam pads so it's a little bit more raised off the card. I quite like them when they're not raised off the card. I seem to be going through a phase of that. My preference for using the tape is something like this, and then just do a little splat in the middle just to make sure everything sticks down. Burnish it down so that when you try and take the tape off, the tape doesn't come away from the card. So there's one piece. If you want to, you can use a pokey tool or the end of a pair of scissors to help get the tape off. Personally, I just prefer using my nail. And I'm going to stick it onto this just plain white 5x7 card. And I'm going to stick it slightly to one side, like so. And then I'm going to just burnish that bit of tape as well. And stick this here. So it's coming off the page, I think maybe down the bottom a little bit. Okay. Now that could be the end of it. And that I think looks quite nice. But something that I also like to do is using just a fine liner pen. Now this is just a set that I got off Amazon. I think there was 8 in the set. You can pick them up quite cheaply, but it's a really nice way of just framing and finishing off your cards. And people get quite scared of doing this because they think, oh, it's got to be a straight line, and it really doesn't. It just has to be some form of framework. So I'm just going to run it around like this. No worries that it's wobbly, it doesn't matter. All the way around the card. There we go. And then we're just going to go down this narrow side, or up this narrow side. And then what I tend to do on them, just to add a little bit more interest, is just some pretend writing. So this isn't my signature, don't get excited. This is just scribble. Or you can choose to just do zigzags. You can do whatever you want, but it just makes it look a little bit more finished. So that is the finished card. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact me, and I'll be back with another video very soon.